Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and yes, we're finally doing it again. Today we complete the first episode in our brand new Rimworld series. This has been by far the single most requested thing on this channel for the past year or so, and with good reason. Our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series was hugely popular, and for a few weeks now I'm really itching to play the game again. And let's be honest, there could not be a better time for it. Not only did Rimworld recently receive the rather extensive 1.1 patch, but just a few days later, the Royalty DLC was released, introducing a mighty empire, psychic powers, quests, and much more. On top of that, the Pete Complete channel just had its 4-year anniversary, and I think it's safe to say that Rimworld has been a pivotal game in the channel's history, so it's only fitting that we start a new series to celebrate, a series that will of course include all of the new content I just mentioned. Now, just like last time, I will spend the next few moments talking about the setup for this run, and I'll leave a timestamp down below if you want to skip straight to the gameplay. At this point, however, I will already say that it is probably going to be even tougher than our Ice Sheet series, which, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend checking out. Our starting scenario for this series will be Naked Brutality with a tribal colonist. We will once again be playing on the hardest difficulty setting, and both our starting location as well as our starting colonist will spice up the challenge even further, but more on that in a second. Before we begin, I quickly want to mention that we're also doing a small giveaway of one copy of the Rimworld Royalty DLC to celebrate the launch of this series. You can find all the information in the description and the comments down below, but taking part is really not that hard. All you have to do is leave a comment on the video, including but not necessarily limited to the word giveaway. The winner will be announced in the next episode, so there is no need to be hasty. If you know me, you also know that the next episode won't come out for at least another week. And with that out of the way, let's see what we're getting ourselves into this time. First of all, we have to choose our starting setup, and we're going with a modified version of the Naked Brutality scenario, probably the hardest of the 4 options here. Crash Landed starts you with 3 technically advanced colonists, Lost Tribe gives you 5 who are a little more rudimentary in terms of knowledge and technology, Rich Explorer gives you 1 very well prepared colonist, and Naked Brutality gives you 1 regular colonist who starts with absolutely nothing, not even clothes. Our modified version ramps up the difficulty a bit more by applying the technological restrictions from the new tribe scenario, and I have also disabled the random joining of new colonists to keep full control over who enters the colony and who doesn't. All in all, very similar to how we began our Ice Sheet series, but the lack of clothing is likely going to make the start even more difficult. Speaking of difficulty, we now have to choose our difficulty setting, but this time I don't think I have to explain in detail the role of the 3 different storytellers. Instead, we're jumping right back down to Randy Random, who is, in my opinion, the most entertaining one, as he is a little less predictable than the other 2, and he worked more or less nicely for us in the last series. We're setting the difficulty up to the highest level. Merciless will make this run a tough one, especially in the beginning, as we won't have anything to defend against attackers, wild animals or disasters, and those will all come, believe me. Now, while I am going to abide by the no reloading rules of commitment mode, we will have to play on reload anytime mode simply for recording purposes. The XCOM series has shown me a few times now that small hiccups can and will occur sooner or later, and especially with this series here, it would be a shame if some of the footage has no audio or several minutes of video get lost because I forgot to hit the record button. I am also working with a brand new recording software for the series that still takes some getting used to, so I think it makes sense to take extra care. Up next, we have a throwback to our Ice Sheet series, as the seed for this playthrough will be Cambiar, our previous cannibal protagonist. So if you want to play along, feel free. All sliders here will remain on their default settings and world coverage will go to 100%, because just like last time, I have a very specific starting location in mind. Right, it took me a while to find a suitable place for us, but here we are in the desert, the extreme desert to be precise. After completing a playthrough on the Ice Sheet, going for the total opposite seemed like the only logical choice to me, and the extreme desert will bring its very own set of unique challenges. Temperatures will be very hot, putting our colonists at a constant risk of heat stroke. Wildlife to hunt will be extremely scarce, and while we can actually grow a few crops out here, suitable patches of ground will be small and the soil will be far from ideal. Thanks to the hot temperatures, our food will also spoil very quickly, a challenge that we thankfully did not have to face on the ice sheet. Additionally, as you can see, we're also playing on a completely flat map with no hills or mountains. That means we won't be able to build a mountain base, and raw resources like stones and steel will also be hard to come by, requiring us to find other means of getting a hold of them. Now, our colony's location is somewhat close by to a neutral tribe, so we will be able to do some trading, and let's be honest, that is pretty much a necessity with the starting scenario we have chosen, but because it's just a tribe, they won't be able to offer us any high-tech equipment, which adds to the challenge. We are also in the neighborhood of an Empire settlement, added by the Royalty DLC, who might have a few more interesting items for sale, but we won't be able to trade with them for a while until we have gathered enough royal favor. If we zoom out a bit, we can see there are a few other settlements in the more distant proximity, so down the line, new opportunities for trading and maybe also raiding are available. Now, just to make sure, in the advanced settings, we'll increase the map size a tiny bit just to have a bit more room to work with and to increase the chance of perhaps finding one or two interesting or valuable things on the map. We'll also start in spring so that you can exactly replicate the starting conditions, again in case you want to play along. And that's all, we have our starting spot located, so let's now meet our colonist. Alright, this right here is the amazing Steak, or Steak for short, our starting colonist named after one of my longtime Patreon supporters. And that is how we're going to handle naming in this series for everyone. Everyone in the naming rights tier or above over on Patreon will get a chance to have their names appear in the series, just like we did in the last one and just like we're also currently doing in the XCOM series. Now, thanks to the Prepare Carefully mod, Steak here is a pretty unusual and also pretty challenging colonist. He is only 19 years young, so he only has a childhood backstory, the Firekeeper backstory to be exact, providing him with a small bonus to his cooking and crafting skills, the latter of which is actually very important in the early game. However, as you can see on the right, those are also the only two skills that Steak has any sort of experience in. In everything else, he is a complete and utter novice. To somewhat make up for that, he has minor passions in every skill, indicated by that small flame, so he'll learn a bit quicker, but it will still take him a long time until he's even remotely competent in just a single skill. I have also decided not to give Steak a single trait either, which is something we did with Cambia in the last series to significantly increase his usefulness, but Steak won't receive any bonuses to his movement speed or stress resistance or any other handy perk that makes life a little easier, so he firmly remains a colonist way below the average. He does, however, have no injuries, and he's also capable of performing every skill in the game, albeit far from expertly, so apart from the restrictions put on us by the harsh location, the lack of supplies, the reduced research speed, the absence of any other helping hands, and of course the merciless difficulty setting, we are not facing any other constraints. And with that, I would say we are ready to once again jump into the action. Our Rimworld Naked Brutality run in the extreme desert with the Royalty DLC begins now. Alright, so here we go again indeed, welcome to the extreme desert. In the middle of our screen we now have a fully naked Steak, surrounded by not much more than sand. It is 6 o'clock in the early morning, so temperatures are still manageable, but before we get going here, let's take a moment to investigate the map. You can see there are a few small patches of rocky hills around us. Those should be able to provide us with building materials for a while, but they definitely won't last us for the entirety of the game. We also have two dromedaries over on the left here, which we might be able to hunt, provided of course they stay on the map long enough. Over in the lower right corner of the map we then have a slightly more unnatural looking structure, definitely a place that we will have to investigate sooner or later. Apart from even more rocks, we then also have a few ruins scattered across the map, perhaps remnants of a civilization long gone, but maybe useful for us for shelter or materials. There is also another interesting looking structure up north here, another place that we want to investigate at some point down the line. And that's it pretty much. Other than that, we only have dirt and sand. So let's now take a quick look at how Steak himself is doing. He is currently not hungry and also somewhat rested. He does, however, have a small mood penalty due to being naked. And because he's naked, his comfortable temperature range is also rather slim, and if temperatures rise above 26 degrees Celsius, which they will very soon, then Steak here will start to feel uncomfortable. For that reason, clothing is high up on our to-do list. Even more important than that, however, is food. So that is what we're now going to focus on first, by having Steak deconstruct a small ruin made of steel. Yes, I know, not exactly the most straightforward way to acquire a meal, but don't worry, there is a plan behind it. We are aiming for 140 units of steel here, twice the carrying capacity of Steak. And here we are, 146, that is absolutely perfect. We will now draw a stockpile zone across the entire area, so that the game immediately recognizes all of that steel as ours. We will then also put down a caravan packing spot right in the middle, and then we'll open the world map. Now, with all of that steel, we will now form a caravan. As I said, Steak is able to carry 70 units worth of steel, and as you can see, steel also has a decent market value, so we'll hopefully be able to exchange these 70 units for some food. Our destination is of course the tribe nearby, and it will take Steak a few hours to get there. However, I am fairly confident that he should be able to make it before nightfall. As we have no food available to us at the moment, we have to confirm to go on this journey without any rations, but then again the plan here is to acquire food, so we should be fine. Steak will now collect all 70 units of steel and then leave the map, and afterwards we can watch him slowly traverse the desert. Now, as he makes his journey, we want to keep an eye on his hunger bar, and we want to take note of the exact value it has once he reaches his destination. And there we are, with 6.3% of food remaining, Steak has reached the Black Troska tribe. So let's do some trading. First things first, we will sell all of our steel, which will sadly only get us 65 silver in return. Now, in terms of food, we have a few choices here. We could go for something prepared in pemmican, but 1 unit of pemmican does actually have the same nutritional value as 1 unit of meat, rice or berries, and at the moment we need to get the highest nutritional value out of the small amount of silver we have, so we will be purchasing exactly 19 units of rice here. With each unit filling the hunger bar by 5%, that is enough to completely max it out. With the remaining silver, we will then purchase as much wood as we can. Our aim is to acquire 30 units to make ourselves the first ranged weapon, and unfortunately we don't have nearly enough growing on our map. And that would be all for the moment. Now we can send Steak back home. With food available, he also immediately consumes all of the rice we have just purchased, and as you can see, his hunger need is completely satisfied for the time being. Since it's getting late, however, Steak is now taking a rest, sleeping away the hours of the night in the middle of the desert. Around 6 in the morning, he then gets moving again, but we can see hunger is already becoming an issue again. Steak then arrives back home at around noon. We can see him here returning to the stockpile where 2 iguanas are also hanging out, and I have also quickly created a small separate stockpile for the wood. If left out in the open, wood will slowly deteriorate, so the least we can do is put it next to the mountain here and build a small roof to protect it. That won't entirely solve the problem, but it's the best we can do for now. Afterwards, we will then do the entire trading journey again. We have 76 units of steel left and we still need some food, so let's form yet another caravan and send Steak on his way. We are also taking the 1 silver coin here instead of 1 additional unit of steel. As you may have seen earlier, we're selling the steel for less than a silver per unit, so at least when it comes to trading, the silver is actually worth more to us. Alright, it is close to nightfall. Steak's hunger bar has been entirely depleted. His mood has also hit a critical level, but he is about to reach his destination. Before that happens, however, we have the very first raid of the series. Now, luckily, no one is home at the moment, meaning the attacker won't actually have anyone to attack. We also don't have any structures in place yet that she might want to destroy, so I guess she'll just hang around for a while. Let's hope that she has lost interest before we return, but first let's continue to do some trading. Again, we're selling off all of our steel and then we're going after the potatoes. Eating them raw will definitely not improve Steak's mood, but again, this early in the game we have to save every penny we can. With the remaining silver, we'll then once again stock up on wood, and then we'll send Steak back home, although before he continues his journey, he will once again get some sleep. Our raiding party of 1 meanwhile seems to be running around rather aimlessly. We will see how long that lasts. And here we are, halfway through the return trip. Our attacker has finally given up. She has left the map and we can send Steak back home safely. As he arrives, we can see that the 2 dromedaries are still there, and that is excellent because we are about to go hunting. Now, unfortunately, in our trading efforts, we have only been able to acquire 29 units of wood instead of 30. In hindsight, we probably should have bought 1 or 2 potatoes less last time, but it's not that bad because we have 1 single cactus on the map. That cactus will provide us with some wood of its own, and because we want to save traveling time, we will have Steak carry the wood he already has with him as he makes his way over there. Then he can start chopping. On the left we can see that the dromedaries are still there, so in the crafting spot I have just put down we can already queue up a short bow. As you can see, we need 30 units of wood to make one, and this weapon is actually also why we went with the Firekeeper backstory earlier, because in order to make it we need a crafting skill of at least 2. While Steak is crafting, we can then see one of the 2 dromedaries is running off, and that is because of a rather unsurprising lack of food on the map. As Steak is just about to finish the short bow, the other dromedary is also about to move, but considering the direction it's taking, we should be able to catch it before it leaves. And there we are, short bow finished. At the same time we are being hit by a solar flare, but we are still very far away from having any electronic devices whatsoever, so this is an incident that we can safely ignore. Instead, we will now have Steak equip his poor quality short bow and then try to catch up with the dromedary. He is luckily a bit faster than the animal, and that is absolutely vital in this situation, because with a shooting skill of 0 we will not even attempt to land a hit from distance. Instead, we will get up close and personal, and then fire the short bow from a distance where we have at least a moderate chance of landing a hit. And as you can see, that is working quite nicely, and luckily also resetting the dromedary's priorities. Where it was once heading straight for the edge of the map in search of food, it is now more concerned with running away from Steak, the much more pressing threat to its survival. Finally then, Steak lands the killing blow, and with that he has now secured himself a food source on this map for the very first time in this series. Now at this point I made a small mistake by putting up a butcher spot right next to the dromedary carcass. It would have been a bit smarter to first drag the corpse up to where we want to eventually put up our first temporary base. Still, he can now butcher the animal for a decent amount of meat and camel hide, good enough to provide him with a filling meal before he then lays down in the sand to get some rest. Now, due to the temperatures out here in the desert, the meat will of course spoil very quickly, but then again it's not that much, so we'll likely consume most of it before it goes bad. At night then, with the solar flare already over, we can watch an interesting situation unfold. Here you can see one of the iguanas we caught a glimpse of earlier, making a straight line for our pile of dromedary meat. And well, considering the amount we have and how fast it spoils, we'll actually let it do that, with the second iguana also joining in a few moments later. Now here's where all of this actually turns out to our advantage. After feeding, the iguanas will, just like Steak, get some rest. And they will do that right next to Steak, meaning we can now sneak up on them. So with his short bow in hand, we will now move Steak up as close as he can, which, in proper XCOM style, gives us a guaranteed hit. Unfortunately, it doesn't kill the iguana and it sends both animals fleeing for the moment, but don't worry, they're not overly ambitious in their escape, so we should be able to kill them both fairly easily, provided of course they do not fight back. But even in that case, we have the advantage of a ranged weapon, albeit, at least for now, a highly inaccurate one. Alright, there we go, one-shot kill with the first iguana. The other one has briefly gone back to sleep but is now active again, but we should hopefully be able to take it out with the next hit as well. Alright, there we go, 2 dead iguanas. That is a decent amount of food for the next few days. And despite the hunting trip, Steak is actually still pretty well rested at the moment, so let's have him do a bit more work. First things first, we'll have him haul the meat over to our already roofed over stockpile, because that is where we will build our first small shelter. And we will build that shelter in style, out of marble to be exact. We have a large marble structure here that we can deconstruct, and even though the entire process takes a while, it provides us with 94 units of marble, more than enough to construct a few walls and a door. Now, what I've planned here is really just a simple shack on the side of the mountain. It will take Steak a while to get this finished because marble is pretty hard to work with, and that is also the reason why I did not fill in the edges to save as much time as possible. We'll also put down a small sleeping spot so that Steak can finally sleep inside somewhere, but then construction is suddenly interrupted by our very first quest. Okay, so the Gutless Praetor has become available. Let's see what this quest is all about. Okay, so it looks like a Praetor of the Empire is calling upon us to help. She is apparently being chased through the desert by an angry goose and asks us to keep her safe in our colony until her shuttle can arrive to pick her up. In exchange, she would bestow upon us 8 units of royal favor, enough to grant us the title of Yeoman, which will unlock psychic abilities. All of that for simply fending off a goose. I think we can confidently accept that quest. We will accept it with Steak since we have no other colonists, so he will be the one receiving the royal favor. And there we go, the medic Synodanus has just arrived on the map. Now, as you can see here, she is a Praetor, and as such, she refuses to do quite a few kinds of work. For example, she considers beneath her all forms of hauling, cleaning, plant and animal work, but not listed here is construction, and we'll actually use that to our advantage. So for the moment, Steak can interrupt the shelter construction. He will now carry the camel hide back over here, while our esteemed guest makes her way over to the building site. While she does, the oh-so-dangerous goose arrives on the map. However, I really don't think we'll have much of an issue taking it down. Now back to our projects, we can see that Synodanus is already busy putting up walls, while Steak himself has put up a table from a nearby ruin and is now also busy constructing. The goose is getting closer though, so let's prepare for combat. Now, just in that moment, Synodanus' shuttle also arrives, so we could in theory now have her just run over there and fly away, which would complete the quest but leave Steak alone with a man-hunting goose. And that is not really the plan I think we should execute, primarily because Synodanus herself has access to a number of very interesting psychic abilities. You can see them here down low in green. She can, for example, slow down a creature or form a psychic link with a target. She can also command a target to approach her, and her psychic abilities even allow her to raise a physical wall from out of the ground. A little further over on the left, she has what is called a psychic entropy meter, Rimworld's equivalent to a mana bar, if you will, and each ability used will fill a portion of that bar up, and the more it fills, the more dangerous things become. I think we'll get a bit more into detail once we have psychic abilities of our own. For the moment, we can have Steak ready his bow and send him into cover and then begin the hunt. With Synodanus, we'll use the burden psychic ability to slow down the goose, but then again it is a fairly slow animal anyway, so there's really not much of a need for it. Our guest herself will then also play the bait as we lure the goose around in circles. This should hopefully allow Steak to land a hit or two, but as you can see, my Rimworld skills appear to be a bit rusty, because the first one to land a hit is the goose. A few moments later, however, an arrow finally connects, and at this point I decided to turn our guest into a melee fighter. One more hit should be enough to eliminate the goose. And indeed, Synodanus punches the goose to death, threat removed, quest more or less completed. Now, our esteemed guest here has suffered a few injuries and should probably get back to her shuttle, but on the right side you can see that the shuttle will actually stay around for quite a while longer, so for a few more hours we can make use of an additional pair of helping hands, and we would be stupid not to take that opportunity. So we'll have both Steak and Synodanus do some construction work now. That will definitely speed up the building process and provide Steak with a working shelter as soon as possible. We can also handily circumvent Synodanus' aversion to hauling by making her our butcher. Since the task of butchering a creature includes hauling the corpse to the butcher spot, and since Synodanus is actually capable of butchering, we will now have her carry over the 2 dead iguanas. She won't do any actual butchering though, because for the moment we have enough meat, but this is a neat little trick to circumvent certain restrictions. Once all animal corpses are much closer to our temporary base, we can have her continue to construct, and then in the evening we do actually have our shelter up and running. All that's missing is a roof, so let's quickly get that in place, and then we can also have her build a marble hoopstone ring, just so that Steak has something to play with and to blow off stress. And once the thing is constructed, he does in fact immediately start playing, while for Cynodanus it is now finally time to leave. We definitely do not want to risk her shuttle leaving without her, so let's have her make the trip over there, enter the shuttle, and then send it off. Alright, and there we go, we have completed our very first quest. Cynodanus has safely escaped both the goose and the desert, and for our help we have received the title of Yeoman and a psychic amplifier. The other two notes here basically say the same. With 8 points of royal favor we have skipped right over the first title of Freeholder to Yeoman, and as such we have been granted access to a psychic amplifier, which has been dropped right next to our base. And we will of course have Steak use it immediately, and there we go, we unlock the psychic ability Burden, the same ability that we just used a moment ago to slow down the goose. And ladies and gentlemen, that in my opinion marks a perfect point to make the cut in today's episode. The first few days out here in the extreme desert have certainly been eventful, but I am very much looking forward to see how our journey continues. Now, to wrap things up, I quickly want to note that of course not all episodes in this series are going to be this long. As many of you already know, I'm doing post-commentary for all of my videos, and that takes a lot of time and effort, so let us realistically aim for 15 to 20 minute episodes from here on out. Also, again, in case you have not seen it yet, please feel free to check out my Rimworld Ice Sheet series, which starts with a very similar setup, but of course in an entirely different biome. Also, do not forget to take part in the giveaway if you're interested in winning a copy of the Royalty DLC for yourself, and I think that's really all I have for today. Now, as always, but of course especially today, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course subscribe to stay up to date and get notified when the next episode goes up, or you can also support me over on Patreon for a chance to have your name appear in the game at some point as well. And that's all. I am super excited to have Rimworld back on the channel, and I hope you are as well. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.